Usually when we think about language, we kind of just think of it as a window. Like you look right through the word and you see the thing it describes.
Right, yeah, like a direct translation.
Exactly. You say, I don't know, tree, and I see a tree. You say car, I see a car. The word itself is pretty much completely transparent.
Yeah, it just functions as this reliable, almost invisible vehicle, just to get your brain straight to the meaning.
But if you step into the world of political linguistics, suddenly that transparent window turns into like a heavy drawn curtain, or maybe more like a funhouse mirror.
Oh, for sure. The funhouse mirror is a great way to put it.
Right, because you're looking at a word, and it's no longer just, showing you what is on the other side. It is actively shaping what you are allowed to see. And today, we are looking at a 3-letter acronym that acts exactly like that funhouse mirror.
It really does. It's totally monopolized the landscape.
It has completely taken over the Russian language media space. And it's just 3 letters. Era, pronounced SVO. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so that stands for Euphemism, which, translated to English, is the special military operation.
And before we really get into the weeds here, I do want to throw out a quick disclaimer for you listening. Because we are obviously dealing with a highly charged, ongoing geopolitical situation today, we're going to keep our focus strictly on what the sources say about the linguistics.
Right, exactly. We're looking at the mechanics.
Yeah, we aren't here to take political sides. We are really just treating this language like an archaeological site, looking objectively at how it was engineered as a tool and how different factions wield it.
Because language in a conflict zone, it is almost always the very first thing to get weaponized. And the mechanics of how that actually happens, they're just deeply revealing about the society using it.
I am just so fascinated by how you go from a really clunky, I think it's an 11-syllable administrative label.
Yeah, 11 syllables. It's a mouthful.
Right. How do you go from that to a generalized surrogate term that completely defines a massive conflict?
Well, to understand that dominance, you really have to look at the legal and media environment starting around February 2022. Because from that point forward, official Russian sources and major mainstream media outlets.
Like RAA Novosti, TSS, places like that.
Exactly, yeah. Channel 1, all the big ones. They began operating under a very specific, legally enforced structural frame.
Because the sources outline that these media outlets, they faced really severe regulatory restrictions. They were literally banned from using common descriptive terms.
Right. Words they'd used for decades.
Yeah, words like K, which means war, or ch, meaning invasion. Those were just off the table.
And when a state legally removes the most common, fundamental descriptive words from the public lexicon, it creates this massive linguistic vacuum.
Like a black hole.
Yes. You suddenly cannot describe the reality outside your door using the words you've used your entire life. So the state filled that deliberate vacuum by mandating the phrase, special military operation.
Just strictly enforcing that exact phrasing.
Right. And by legally forcing this comprehensive contextual framing, it basically became the absolute most frequently appearing term in the entire Russian information ecosystem.
But, 11 syllables is an incredibly heavy lift for anyone to just say every day on the evening news.
Yeah.
Let alone in, casual conversation at a bus stop or something.
Oh, it's totally impractical for daily use.
It honestly reminds me of a corporate rebrand. Like when management rolls out some incredibly long, sterile phrase for a massive layoff, like strategic workforce optimization or something.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody actually says that in the break room.
Right. You need a euphemism treadmill.
And sociolinguists actually observed that exact human impulse happening in real time with this term. The Russian-speaking world did what humans always do with cumbersome, mandated language. They compressed it for efficiency.
So they just squished it down.
Yeah. The society took those 3 long words and just rapidly condensed them into the acronym ELAN.
Okay, so the state mandates the structural frame, but the society, shrinks it down to fit in their pockets.
That's a great way to look at it.
But what happens when a society compresses a legal term like that is it turns into this cultural mega symbol. It stops being just administrative. Because based on the sources, this acronym holds 2 completely contradictory meanings, depending entirely on who is saying it.
It really does. It perfectly reflects this massive tug of war in public opinion. If you look at the Russian state and its supporters, it represents this legalistic technical distinction.
It's like a surgical tool for them.
Exactly. It emphasizes a controlled military action carried out for very specific officially stated goals, which the government defined as demilitarization and denazification. So to that group, the term signifies precision and containment, definitely not an all-out chaotic war.
But then you look at dissidents, or Ukraine, and Western Russian language media, and they use the exact same acronym, but the meaning is just completely flipped upside down.
Right. Totally inverted.
They often use it mockingly, like putting it in ironic quotation marks. In those circles, the sources say the acronym is viewed as this blatant, Orwellian political euphemism, designed specifically to gloss over the devastating, messy reality of the conflict.
And the tension held within those three letters, it really makes it an incredible case study. You have a single term meaning a precise legal necessity to one group and a deceptive cover-up to another.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's wild that this acronym has become such an intense symbol of Russian nationalism and sovereignty, considering what the actual letters stand for historically.
The historical irony here is just remarkable.
Right, because when you tear this word apart, the outer letters of this acronym, they are actually Western European imports.
Yeah, they really are. So if we start with the S, which stands for Esek Tora Fsia, meaning special, the etymology traces straight back to the Latin word specialis, which just means particular or individual.
So how on earth does a Latin word end up doing all the heavy lifting in a modern Russian military acronym?
Well, for that, we have to zoom out a bit, back to the 18th century and look at Peter the Great.
Okay, the big modernization push.
Exactly. He initiated this massive systemic wave of westernization. He wanted to modernize Russia, build a competitive navy, reform the sprawling bureaucracy so they could rival other European powers.
And to do that, he didn't just import shipbuilders and European fashion. He imported a massive amount of vocabulary.
He had to. Russians simply didn't have the administrative or technical terminology that he needed at the time. So Asachua comes in during this really aggressive push to make Russia sound and function more like Western Europe.
And it integrated seamlessly into the grammar, right? Like if you are learning Russian right now, Ahisatua in this context is a qualitative adjective.
Yes. Specifically, it sits in the nominative singular feminine form.
Because it has to match the gender and the number of the noun it is modifying, which is operation, at the very end of the phrase.
Right. Adjectives in Russian are essentially like mirrors. They always have to reflect the gender, number, and case of their noun. But beyond the grammar itself, the root of this word, it became what linguists call highly productive.
I love that term. It's like linguistic Lego. You can just snap it onto all sorts of things to build brand new concepts.
Yes, exactly like Legos. You see it everywhere in modern Russian. You attach it to meglodi, meaning special forces, or atmishus, meaning specialist. It always carries that clinical, professional, slightly bureaucratic flavor that Peter the Great was originally aiming for.
Okay, so let's skip over to the other bookend of the acronym, the MA. This stands for son or operation.
Right, and this is another Western European loanword. It also stems from Latin, originally from operatio, meaning action, work, or surgery.
Surgery, really.
Yeah. The sources indicate it entered the Russian language via German or French right around the end of the 17th century, and initially it was primarily used for medical procedures.
So before it ever saw a battlefield, it was strictly clinical.
Completely clinical. And honestly, in modern Russian, it retains this incredible sterile versatility. Emieka can be a life-saving medical surgery or a sprawling military campaign or just a routine financial transaction at your local bank.
It is basically the ultimate process-driven word.
Perfectly said.
I do want to pause on the grammar for a second, though, because the sources mention this specific shift from Kojago to Migo that trips up a lot of learners. And I want to make sure we actually explain how that works for you guys listening.
Oh, yeah. That is a foundational rule. So, Baraja is a feminine noun, and it ends in the letters aa, pronounced ti-ya.
Right.
And Russian has an entire category of these words. They are mostly borrowed from Latin or French, like use for revolution or shufs for information.
And they sound incredibly close to their English counterparts.
Which is a trap, right?
It is totally a trap, because the trap for a learner is assuming they behave like English nouns. But Russian uses a case system, meaning the ending of the noun physically changes based on what job it is doing in the sentence.
So it shapeshifts.
Exactly. When a noun ending in "shus" shifts into the prepositional case, which is what you use when you are talking about the location of something. The ending transforms. The ending at the very end drops off entirely, and it is replaced by an "an."
Okay, so if I'm learning the language and I want to just say the operation is happening, I use the base word, asha. But if I want to say he is in the operation,
Then you would shift to "yam." The ending becomes "yam," pronounced "tsii."
okay, I see. I just drop the yeah sound and add an e sound.
Yeah, you got it. It might seem like a minor spelling quirk, but it is a core mechanism of the language. Understanding that shift allows you to navigate location and direction, without relying purely on prepositions the way we do in English. All right, so we have our bookends, the awa and the yasha.
Yeah.
Two highly versatile clinical Latin loanwords brought in centuries ago to modernize and westernize the Russian Empire. And they are serving as the outer shell of this modern acronym.
Right.
But sandwiched right in the middle of those European imports is the yes.
Oh, yeah. The Hein is a completely different beast.
It stands for Esha, which means military. And unlike the outer letters, this one has absolutely zero Western DNA.
None at all. It is purely Slavic.
The sources trace it back to the Old East Slavic word Oesha, which means warrior or soldier. But the etymology goes even deeper than that, right?
It does. Linguists have actually traced this back to the Proto-Indo-European root way. And the meaning of that ancient root is incredibly visceral. It literally means to pursue, strive for victory, oppress.
Wow. To oppress. That is heavy. How do linguists even know that?
Well, you have to look at comparative linguistics. They basically track consistent sound shifts across thousands of years. They compare ancient languages like Sanskrit, Ancient Greek, Latin, and Old Church Slavonic.
Just mapping the family tree of the word.
Exactly. And they find this specific root way consistently popping up whenever ancient tribal societies talked about pursuing something aggressively, striving for dominance, or outright oppressing a rival group.
Just think about the contrast we are looking at here. On the outside of the acronym, you have these technical, bureaucratic, imported Latin words. They sound sterile, like a bank transfer. But the beating heart of the acronym, the V, carries a thousands of years old human drive to conquer and fight.
It's a stark contrast.
It's like dressing a gladiator in a modern corporate suit. The outer layers are all HR speak and legal disclaimers, but the core is ancient combat.
That's a perfect analogy. Underneath that corporate suit, the B relies on a purely ancient Slavic foundation. And because that root is so old and foundational, it is splintered into several different words in modern Russian that learners frequently mix up.
Yeah, the sources issue a pretty strong warning about confusing shorty and essa. And I've got to say, to a non-native ear, those sound practically identical.
They really do.
They share the same first few letters. The spelling is close enough to guarantee a failed vocabulary quiz. So how do we keep them straight?
You have to look at their grammatical function. They all share that ancient combative DNA, but they do very different jobs. First, you have pronounced Voin. This is a noun meaning warrior. It refers to the physical person doing the fighting.
The individual gladiator. Got it.
Next is Voin, pronounced Vojna. This is also a noun, but it means war. This is the abstract event, the state of conflict itself.
And the stress is different there.
Yes. Notice the stress shift. The emphasis moves to the final syllable. And this is the specific, highly charged word that was heavily restricted by censors in the Russian media space.
The forbidden word. Okay, and the third variation.
The third is pronounced Voyenny. This one is an adjective. It means military or war-related. You use this to describe something else, a military base, a military uniform, or, in the case of our acronym, a special military operation.
Okay, so Lewa is the warrior, Leis is the war, and is the adjective describing the military.
Exactly. You nailed it.
So what does this all mean? We have the history, tracking this from ancient Proto-Indo-European tribes all the way to Peter the Great's modernization. But the sources show that the evolution of this term did not stop in the past, or even in 2022, because language is a living, breathing organism.
Oh, absolutely. When a top-down administrative label hits the streets, citizens inevitably mold it to fit their everyday reality.
An 11-syllable legal mandate is just too abstract for daily life.
Way too abstract. So we are seeing the acronym actually reproducing in the wild, creating brand new grammar and derivative words in real time.
Let's look at how it is shaping identity, because the sources highlight a relatively new word, SVOшник. How exactly are they building this word grammatically?
They are taking the raw three-letter acronym akaber and attaching a classic Russian agentive suffix, a suffix.
An agentive suffix. meaning it creates a noun representing a person who does a specific action, like adding to bake to get baker.
Yes, that's exactly how it works. In Russian, Iri is primarily used to create a masculine noun referring to a person associated with a particular thing, profession, or activity.
Can you give an example of a common one?
Sure, a really common example is oyuyu, meaning school, becoming a schoolboy. So by slapping oya onto ati, they create ati.
And the sources define a highly colloquial street-level term for Russian servicemen or veterans participating in the operation. What strikes me is how this strips away all that bureaucratic distance we talked about.
It really does. It makes it human.
Right.
It's incredibly formal. It wears a tie. But that sounds like a guy you run into at the grocery store.
Well, society cannot maintain a sterile 11-syllable distance from an event that impacts their daily lives so profoundly. The language forces an intimacy onto the abstract concept. It transforms a government mandate into flesh and blood. You don't interact with an administrative operation, you know. You interact with a person. Hey, Brie.
That makes total sense. And the acronym isn't just claiming identities, it is literally claiming territory on a map. The sources point to the phrase apatishet,
Translating to the SVO zone, and this has evolved into a fixed collocation in Russian media.
meaning those words are now permanently glued together in the public consciousness, like as a single concept.
Yes, almost all frontline Russian news broadcasts now begin with the exact phrase, ABB, meaning in the SVO zone.
Wait, I hear the grammar shift there.
Good catch. Yes, we are seeing that prepositional case at work again.
Oh.
Because the preposition meaning in, just like she became Jorde Aryer.
Exactly. Conceptually, this is a massive shift. They have taken an acronym that describes an administrative process and used it to draw a physical, geographical boundary.
It's no longer just an action happening in the abstract. It is a physical place you can travel to. You can actually be standing in the SVO zone.
The state created the initial term to strictly control the narrative of an action, but the society and the media ecosystem have just completely evolved it. It now defines the human beings fighting it, the very ground it is fought on, the meat.
It really is a masterclass in how language adapts to survive its environment. Let's kind of zoom out and trace the journey we've taken through the sources today.
Sounds good.
We started with an 11-syllable state-mandated phrase that was designed to fill a linguistic vacuum by legally replacing the word war. We watched sociolinguistics in action as society compressed it into a snappy three-letter acronym.
And then we explored how that acronym became a surrogate term holding totally opposite meanings, a symbol of precise legal necessity for supporters and a deceptive cover-up for dissidents.
We dug into the archaeological layers of the words themselves, finding the deep irony of the outer letters, special in operation being clinical Latin loanwords imported by Peter the Great to westernized Russia.
While the core letter, the Iver for military, pulses with this ancient Proto-Indo-European Slavic drive for victory and conquest.
And we untangled the grammar, too, practicing the shift into the prepositional case by dropping the toward for an armene and breaking down the stress shifts so nobody confuses the warrior with the war itself.
Finally, we witnessed the term breeding in the wild, spawning colloquial identities and establishing physical geographies on the map.
So if you are learning Russian, or honestly just trying to understand the modern world, you are walking away with more than just vocabulary today. You have a structural understanding of the sociolinguistic mechanics of modern conflict.
You can see exactly how language is engineered by a state, deployed in the media, and ultimately reshaped by the people on the street.
We spent this time analyzing how a single foreign abbreviation can entirely reframe a nation's public discourse in just a few short years, legally replacing fundamental words and spawning its own vocabulary.
It really forces you to look at the mechanics of your own native tongue differently, doesn't it?
It brings us right back to that funhouse mirror or the drawn curtain we talked about at the beginning.
It leaves you wondering, what other invisible acronyms or comfortable euphemisms in our own daily lives are quietly acting as those drawn curtains?
Oh, that's a great point.
Right. Like, what administrative sterile words are we using right now that are actively shaping the way we perceive our own reality without us even noticing the magic trick?
If the transparent window is actually a heavily engineered wall, who built the wall, and what exactly is it blocking from your view? Something to think about the next time you catch yourself casually using a corporate buzzword or a political acronym. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.